MacuHealth is a nutritional supplement leader. Our targeted formulas include MacuHealth for daily eye health, MacuHealth Plus for aging eye support, Vitreous Health for vitreous care, Vision Edge Pro for visual performance in athletes, TG Omega-3 for ocular and systemic wellness, and MacuHealth DM for eye and metabolic support. Call MacuHealth today and mention this podcast for special discounts. Experience the difference with MacuHealth. Nutrition you can see.
With more screen usage and indoor time, myopia, also known as nearsightedness, is increasing and getting worse in children. Now, certified eye doctors can prescribe MiSight One Day, the first and only FDA-approved soft contact lens to slow myopia progression in age-appropriate children. Visit CooperVision.com to find a Brilliant Futures certified eye doctor near you. Do your patients know what presbyopia is?
There are people who are afraid of the press.
Have you talked to your patients about multifocal contact lenses?
I've heard the bifocal, but not multifocal.
Not multifocal.
Do you need help with your multifocal strategy? Learn more at the conclusion of this episode. Welcome back to part 3 of my interview with Dr. Elisa Song. In part 3, Dr. Song continues to drop pearls to help our kids live healthier and happier. If you're new here and you like our interviews, press like, subscribe, share, and hit the bell. Also, please leave comments. Be sure to watch our full-length documentary, Open Your Eyes, on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube Movies and Shows. Because I've had patients with uveitis, which is an inflammation within the eye. I mean, we have to treat traditionally, but conventionally, but also referring to someone who does functional medicine, the patients did much better. Now, I'm going to ask you, Bill Davis, he loves Lactobacillus rhodori. Can you talk about that? And does that have any place with kids?
Oh, absolutely. So Lactobacillus rhodori can, when we think about strains, the Lactobacillus rhodori is one type of, there are many different kinds of Lactobacillus rhodori. Let's put it that way. And so for babies, there is, I'm just going to look up which particular strain it is. It's called Lactobacillus rhodori DSM. 17938. Okay, that's kind of a long, but when you find that one strain, which is actually patented by a company called BioGaia, okay, that particular strain for babies has been found to significantly reduce colic, tummy, fussiness, bloating, GI distress in infants. And in fact, it's a great one to use for infants in the early stages to help support a healthy microbiome progression in infants, especially if they're more colicky, fussy, reflux, and all the things. And if that can prevent them from needing antacid medications as infants, even better. On the other hand, there are other Lactobacillus rhodori strains. There's lots of them, but there's one strain called RC14 that has been found to help support vaginal health. So you'll see Lactobacillus rhodori, but strains specific for vaginal health in women's oriented probiotics. So the strain matters, but Lactobacillus rhodori is one of our most important, overall categories of probiotics that can be very helpful.
And H. pylori, decrease inflammation, IBS.
Yeah. With H. pylori, there's also there's one supplement company. Is it let me just look here. I think it's PyloGuard, right? By PyloGuard by Microbiome Labs that has this one particular strain, which great reports for H. pylori. And we know from a conventional treatment, H. pylori, it's hard to treat. And conventional treatments with the triple therapy and the antibiotics and the antacids, then I wonder, okay, what worse harm are we causing by doing that? And so when I've treated H. pylori, and H. pylori in children can be what is the right word? Not pathogenic. I mean, sometimes commensal, right? It can actually be beneficial on some level. But for kids who are having troubles, then what I will do is use Pylogard and zinc carnosine. So zinc carnosine is another supplement I'll use for H. pylori.
One of the biggest fears when someone is given an antibiotic by a physician, especially in the hospitals, is C. diff. Something that we want to try to prevent is somebody getting C. diff. If you could talk about that and anything with fecal transplants, has that progressed at all with treatment for C. diff?
Um, fecal transplants are, I mean, the only indication now that's approved is really for recurrent C. diff, right? C. diff or Clostridia difficile in children with autism can be an issue because we know that the propionic acid that is secreted by the Clostridia um, can cause more of these autism-like symptoms in animal studies. In fact, there's from UC Davis, there was a rat study where they and rats are very social beings, right? They live together, they communicate, and and socialize. And so it was quite remarkable watching this one video where the researchers infused some rats with propionic acid from Clostridia, and then these rats took on very repetitive antisocial behaviors, started ignoring the other rats, climbing in circles all over them, and not communicating. And then as soon as the propionic acid was taken away, they became more social. And so, we do find for some kids on the spectrum, treating their Clostridia can help support some of these behaviors, right? And so, but and there are some really fascinating studies looking at fecal transplants in kids on the spectrum, also with longer lasting improvements in their autism behaviors. And so I think it's fascinating. We're not really at the point where fecal transplant is going to be widely used, but I think that the possibilities are really key. Now, I do have a caveat with that. I mean, there are also stories and case reports of people with fecal transplants, their gut symptoms improve, but they start having different thoughts or liking different music or preferring different foods, right? Because our microbiome, we
How
think we're in
fascinating is that?
yes, and we think we're in control of all of this. It's our microbiome telling our brains what foods we like, what music, we like, even, how we react to different emotional stimuli. And so our microbiome is as personal as us. And so I just, I have some hesitations there. It's a little bit, it's a strange thing, right? It's fascinating, but what else are we changing about our gut brain connection that we may not necessarily want as a side effect? I mean, if you're having debilitating, you know, um, um, C. diff and colitis, then of course, I mean, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. But we, it's not something that I take lightly. I would want to, if I were doing a fecal transplant, I would send that sample first to um, I would send it to Tiny Health, do an analysis, make sure that all the positive microbes that I would want, make sure there's not any abnormal microbes that inadvertently are there, even with testing beforehand. I would want a deeper breakdown of not just the microbiota species, but also their function analysis, make sure that even the beneficial flora that's there, that they can make vitamins for me and GABA and the right short chain fatty acids and all of that.
Anytime I prescribe an antibiotic, I'm always thinking because probably 60, 70, 80% of antibiotics that are prescribed are not even needed.
Hmm.
Are not even needed. So, and I never want to put somebody in a position where I'm messing up their gut bacteria and causing another problem. Now, tell me about Lactobacillus GG, the importance
Yep.
of that and how it relates to eczema, decreasing eczema or asthma, especially if of a pregnant female is taking it toward the end of their pregnancy.
So Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, and again, there are different strains of Lactobacillus rhamnosus, but the Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG is really the most widely studied probiotic in infants for decades now, and is so beneficial for infants, especially if we have concerns about their eczema, asthma history, progression, their risk. But even, risk for things like maybe ADHD, or autism. Now, Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, um, how does it do its work? Because remember, for infants, we want mostly bifidobacteria. Well, the fascinating thing is that Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, it doesn't necessarily stick in your microbiome, but it helps to support the growth of bifidobacteria. It's kind of like this friendly, you know, I don't know what you'd call it, like the Pied Piper, I guess I would imagine, right? Coming in and saying, "Hey, Bifido, come on in," right? And so, we can see from the studies, for instance, again, these studies are old. I mean, these are like almost 40 years old now. So we should be shouting this out. But one study looked at mothers where there's a family history on either side of the family of eczema, asthma, allergies, so atopy, and gave pregnant mothers Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG during the third trimester and while she was nursing, and that significantly reduced the risk of that baby developing atopic disease, which is amazing. A low cost, Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG is readily available over the counter as a supplement called Culturelle. In fact, that was what was used, in the studies. You can find it at any pharmacy, right? And so why not recommend, if there's a strong family history of eczema or asthma or allergies, hey, why don't you take this probiotic while you're, during your third trimester and while you're nursing? That seems to me like a no-brainer, right? Along the same study kind of had different arms, and it was a small study, but they took a subset of infants and gave them Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG for the first 6 months of life. And then they followed that group and the group that didn't get LGG over time and measured their microbiomes and followed them through their teenage years. So it was actually quite a long-term study, and found that even by I think it was 12 months of age, early on there was an increase of bifidobacteria in the probiotic supplemented group. But then as kids got older and by the teenage years, there was no difference in what their microbiomes really look like. No significant difference. But in the probiotic supplemented group, there were no cases of ADHD or autism, so significantly less than the control group that didn't get probiotic supplements. And so, the authors really conjecture there was some priming going on where that Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, with the subsequent increase in bifidobacteria, really helped to shape how that child's immune system and how their brain developed, so that there were, less risks of having problems later on.
As we finish up, I know people are sitting at home. They're thinking about their microbiome and they want to repair it. In functional medicine, we have the 5 Rs. If you could talk a little bit about the 5 Rs and for people at home, how they could learn about it, why what they mean and the importance of them.
Yeah. And I actually, so I tried to make it even more simple and even more foundational. And in my book, I call it the gut reset, because I really want parents to know there's a way we can do this. Even if your kid's a teenager and you're like, oh my gosh, they had 10 rounds of antibiotics and now they're suffering with anxiety and ADHD and asthma and all the things. We can always restore a disrupted gut microbiome. It's really important, because I have some families who come and they're like, oh my gosh, I had a C-section, they had antibiotics, and they think, okay, there's their child is doomed, right? But we can always shift that. But the reason I called it the reset is because the RE in the reset is returning to what I call the 5 things for microbiome magic. It's how we eat, breathe, sleep, hydrate, move every day that supports our gut microbiome. If we do not have these foundations in place, we can do, from a functional medicine standpoint, the 5 Rs to heal a leaky gut. But without those foundations of that diet and lifestyle, microbiome champions, fiber, fermented foods, phytonutrients, your microbiome is going to start sliding back. And we've all, as functional medicine practitioners, seen this where, we work on, give lots of supplements, eliminate some foods that kids are reactive to or adults are reactive to. Great, they go into remission, they're better. But then 6 months down the road or a year down the road, the symptoms start to come back because they haven't shifted their diet and lifestyle to a microbiome nourishing diet and lifestyle, right? So we always have to get back to that. Now, the set part, there's a few different pieces there. But the first S is sealing and healing the leaky gut. And that's where, we remove the things that are inflammatory to the gut. We're going to give gut healing, lining support supplements like glutamine and your omega-3s and your zinc. And then, again, even there, we want to drink bone broth and do all those things. The E is eliminating gut dysbiosis. I actually do that. I don't necessarily do that first. Before we start killing bad bacteria, we need to build up the good bacteria. And just by doing that, we can start crowding out the dysbiotic organisms so there's less to kill in the first place, right? And so, we always want to support and build up before we kill. That's a must for kids and adults. And then the T is, really transforming the microbiome. And that's where it's not just about probiotic supplements. Yes, we want to transform by giving back, re-inoculating, with those healthy bacteria, but we're also working on the vagus nerve. We're working on really supporting a healthier gut-brain connection so that the gut microbiome stays more resilient in the long run.
And kombucha, good or bad? You see all this kombucha in the supermarkets. It looks like healthy soda. Is it really healthy soda?
I love kombucha, and in fact, we brew our own kombucha at home. I mean, they're like my third and fourth babies. I mean, because I have, my scobies are the what you make kombucha out of, and I have a kombucha SCOBY, which I feed it black tea and sugar, and then I have my Jun SCOBY, which I feed green tea and honey, and so it gives a slightly different flavor. But kombucha, when you ferment kombucha. And the SCOBY, which stands for Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast, feed the tea leaves, feed on the tea leaves and the sweeteners, whether it's sugar or honey. They create all of these beneficial byproducts called postbiotics that are chock full, kind of teeming in that kombucha brew, just like it's in sauerkraut juice, it's in beet kvass juice, kefir, all of those. I mean, the benefit of fermented foods is mostly more, I think, in their postbiotic content than they are in their probiotic content. Because some of these fermented foods, they don't actually have a lot of live cultures in them. But the kombucha, for instance, has GABA, which is a calming neurotransmitter. It has some serotonin. It has your B vitamins. It's going to have your short chain fatty acids in there. I mean, all of these factors that help support our brains and our immune systems. And in fact, one study, I mean, this study looked at fermented foods in general, but they took a group of young women with social anxieties, and the only intervention was fermented foods, and that significantly reduced their social anxieties. Now, why not? Right? I mean, such a lower cost intervention than throwing them on medications, which can have, microbiome disrupting and mental health side effects that, really are, would are unnecessary if we could just have them eat more fermented foods.
MacuHealth, your science-born and tested solutions for visual performance, macular degeneration, and dry eye syndrome. New products coming soon. Embrace the science.
So how do we get kids to eat more fermented foods? I know you have a blackberry lemonade and you talk about flavor learning. Tell us how we could get kids, so we could sneak it in some other food, some of the sauerkraut juice and some of their other foods they don't even realize they're eating it.
Yeah. I think you have to start young. I did not start young enough with my children, but if I had to do it all over again, I would have, even from when I was starting their first foods, I would have just given them a tiny little bit of kraut juice, or a tiny, put some sauerkraut mixed in with their meats or with their foods, with their meals. So you start young and you just keep trying. But you mentioned my fermented blackberry lemonade recipe. You can ferment just about anything. So you can ferment fruit and, use it on, just throw some into your smoothies, make them into popsicles, uh, you know, um, I've pureed them and made a smoothie and then make them into jello. So there's lots of different ways you can get kids to start liking fermented foods. And then when they realize, okay, fermented foods is not just about pickles and sauerkraut, then they can start changing their mindset around, actually, I do like fermented foods, and then start trying others. Now, what you mentioned with the flavor learning, that's another really interesting one. I had a friend who her daughter didn't like fermented foods, but she loved ketchup, as do many kids. And so she took, whenever she gave her daughter ketchup, she just would mix a tiny little bit of the kraut juice in with the ketchup and then gradually increase the amount of kraut juice that was in there very, very gradually. And eventually her daughter, realized, I actually don't mind sauerkraut. So you can start to learn, if you pair it with a favorite food, your brain has that safety signal that, okay, I like this food, and then you're changing the flavor just a tiny little bit, so your brain and your taste buds start to communicate together. And you can also ferment. We will ferment salsa or make fermented salsa. You can ferment your ketchup, and there's lots of different ways you can actually ferment the condiments that you're using to get that into your kids.
And the ideal diet for kids, what would that be for you? If you're going to start the kids young, they're starting to eat, what would be the ideal diet and how would they eat?
I also want to, make sure that diets are, you know, really uh, culturally compatible too. I grew up in a Korean household where, we had kimchi as part of our foods, and there were a lot of Korean foods that were staples of ours. Um, Now, the best diet is one that has variety. That, like, just bottom line, you have to have variety. I don't want kids eating necessarily the same things over and over every day, because each of those different kinds of plant fibers and different colors and different kinds of protein profiles, all of those have different benefits for your child's body and their brains. So having variety, but I think, when we look at a plate, what I would love is for half the plate to be vegetables and a variety of different vegetables. A third of that, I guess a quarter of that plate to be your animal protein, and then a quarter some sort of a whole grain. And then there's going to be some healthy fats in there too, whether it's avocados or drizzling olive oil on there. And so really having kind of vegetable forward would be my ideal. But if your kids aren't eating many vegetables just yet, we don't get there overnight. First, we have to model it as parents, and then also just make sure that it's available. So sometimes, if your kids come home and they're hungry, if you have a plate of, chopped carrots and chopped celery and chopped radishes, I mean, I know my kids will go for that. If it's not chopped up, what do? They go to the pantry and they look for the chips that are easy to grab, or whatever else is quick and easy. So it's just a little preparation, not too hard, but making it really easily accessible. Chop up apples and just have that there, so that instead of reaching for whatever's in the pantry, which usually what's in the pantry is not going to be as great as something you can chop up and leave out.
I have to ask you about adopted kids. Formula, there's about 2% of the children are adopted, and they can't breastfeed, or kids that can't breastfeed. What is the best formula for a kid that cannot breastfeed?
Yeah. And this is true for, for families, not just adopted families, but I would say um, there's really not a particularly great formula that I love. And the thing that we have to know with US made formulas that are approved and certified by the FDA as infant formulas, there are certain things that I actually don't want in them, as for children. For instance, the FDA, in order to be called an infant formula, must use folic acid, not folate. And we know that many of us have issues with methylation, and it's very important to use methylfolate, a folate form of folic acid. So, um, and same thing with B12, I I would rather not use cyanocobalamin, which is the standard form. It's better to use methylcobalamin. So there's certain things like this that, uh, that that really make infant formulas not ideal. What I do look for in an infant formula is that lactose is the primary sugar, because that is the primary sugar found in human breast milk. I would love for it to have some human milk oligosaccharides in it. More formulas are adding that. If not, that's okay. You can um, buy a human milk oligosaccharide supplement from, Begin Health or Layer Origin, and just supplement that. I tend to like the European organic formulas better, like Hip or Holly, because they do use methylfolate. Um, I'll typically start with a European formula. In the United States, there's a toddler formula called Serenity. That is, if you look at the nutrient profile, it's very similar to an infant formula profile, but it's called toddler because it has methylfolate in it, right? And it has all these other things that I would rather have. So I also recommend getting powder, not the liquid ready to feed formulas, because the liquid ready to feed formulas, almost all of them have xanthan gum. So I don't want to give your baby emulsifiers from the start.
Hmm. Interesting. Now, to finish up, you've done a lot you do a lot of testing, and you found that a lot of kids are nutrient deficiency, especially with zinc. And there's some very unusual symptoms with zinc deficiency. If you could talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I love giving this pearl because it's a relatively simple one. Um, when for kids who have sensory issues, they very often need more zinc, and they may be outright deficient in zinc when I check their blood levels, or they may be on the very bottom. And now, what do I mean by that? So, if your kids are picky eaters, if they can't stand loud sounds, if they don't like tags on their shirts or seams on their socks, maybe they're the kid that they only have one pair of soft sweatpants that they'll wear, they won't wear jeans, anything that has to do with sensory overload, um, especially the picky eating part, guys. If you start giving them a little bit of a zinc supplement, I would say increase zinc rich foods, but with picky eating, you're kind of stuck there from the beginning. But starting a little zinc can make a huge difference. I had one mom come up to me, and she had heard me on a podcast, and her kid was eating literally like 5 different foods. Started her child on some liquid zinc, and she said within a month her kid was willing to try different foods, and her food palette had already expanded to maybe 12 different foods from the initial 5. I mean, huge difference. And so, and sometimes, the reason I like to measure a red blood cell zinc is because sometimes kids need a lot more zinc than you might think. But I start with low. I mean, and you can find there's a liquid zinc by Pure Encapsulations. Mary Ruth has a liquid zinc. There's I think there's a Trace Minerals ionic zinc. I mean, there's different ways you can get zinc. We have a chewable zinc.
And the zinc tally test, you found that to be accurate?
Um, it's harder to do with kids, so I don't do it necessarily, right? But yeah, I mean, if you can taste the zinc, that means that, I mean, it does. I do find for older kids and adults, it can be, if you taste that zinc, it means that your body's deficient.
And how about giving them pumpkin seeds or something like that? Something that
Yeah, well, I would love to get your zinc levels up with food. And so one way, if your kids will do this, is if you grind up pumpkin seeds and make it into a fine powder, you can put into your baked goods, you can put into oatmeal, you can put into soups, sprinkle it on vegetables. But that is, I've had families, this one family in particular who was a vegetarian. And so zinc levels are highly correlated with animal protein intake, but they were vegetarian. So mom just put pumpkin seeds on everything, and I was amazed at how beautifully her daughter's zinc levels went up.
And my last question would be, what supplements should they have? And is there a multivitamin that's good for kids, a chewable or a liquid that you could give kids? Do you recommend the multivitamins? Do you recommend omega-3s for all kids? Does it really help with the brain development, omega-3s, a multivitamin omega-3s, maybe vitamin D, K2, in a little liquid. How about which multi do you, what type of supplements do you recommend that you would give to your kids starting from the beginning?
Yeah. I mean, I would say vitamin D is absolutely a must. I mean, that was probably the one consistent supplement that I'll give because across the board, the almost all infants and children are going to be low or insufficient in vitamin D. Um, Now, as far as a multi goes, there's just not one multi that I'm in love with, so I can't recommend across the board a multi. Now, um, I am developing, and I'll let you know, hot off the presses, the children's the supplement that I wish I had had when my kids were young, but now I'm making it for kids everywhere. It's an all-in-one daily multi for your kids and their microbiomes. So a complete multivitamin and mineral, a, fi-
Fantastic.
a prebiotic fiber blend, fermented food blend. It's amazing. But short of that, okay,
Do we have a
that's
name? Do we have
that's
a name yet? A name for it?
it's called Hello Biome.
Oh,
And it's
beautiful.
yep, yep. So that's coming. But then, because I don't love any particular multi, what I'll do is kind of piece together. I think most kids need extra vitamin D. Most kids need an omega-3 because they're not getting enough fish in their diets. Um, and uh that's probably the two that I'll consistently have kids on, and then a probiotic here and there, depending on what's going on with their gut. Typically, I'll try to get fermented foods in, and then probiotics are sort of as needed after antibiotics, or if we're working them up and we see that they have some dysbiosis.
And omega-3 liquid from since they're an infant, would you say that's okay? And you think that helps with brain development?
Yeah. Now, I mean, ideally, if you're nursing, moms are getting adequate omega-3s in their diet because that is going to get passed through the breast milk. But otherwise, there is like Nordic Naturals has an infant DHA liquid, which is basically liquid cod liver oil, right? It's just packaged in an infant dropper. But you can put that into a bottle and mix with milk and give to the babies. I'll wait until they're a little bit older. I might start them at like 4 to 6 months of age for the omega-3s. But yeah, and then as kids get older, there are fish oils that come in liquid form. The chewable ones usually don't have enough. And the gummy ones certainly don't have enough. So I usually tend towards a liquid, or Nordic Naturals has an ultimate omega gummy that's more of a square that is a higher potency concentrated one. So that one is actually okay, not the gummy fish. Like those don't have enough by any means.
And I guess you got to be careful with gummy. You could get too much sugar.
Well, yeah, so that is also, you have to just watch out. I'm very particular about gummy vitamins. I look to make sure that they really don't have added sugars to it, which is hard to find, and that they don't have artificial sugars, to replace. And so it's hard to find a really high quality, good gummy vitamin out there.
As far as the eyes go, we love lutein, mesozeaxanthin, zeaxanthin, a product called MacuHealth that puts it all together. It's great for athletes. It helps the visual processing speed. It helps going from light to dark, helps being some kids are so sensitive to light, helps with light sensitivity. So that's a really great supplement that we use. And so I want to thank Dr. Song for spending so much time with me. We just got caught up in the time. She's amazing. People want to find out more about you, your book, your Instagram. How can they find out about you?
So the best place to find me is my website, healthykidshappykids.com. And then I'm most active on Instagram. So it's healthykids_happykids. So definitely stay in touch.
Thank you, Dr. Song. Thank you for all the time. You were great.
You're welcome.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
MacuHealth is a nutritional supplement leader. Our targeted formulas include MacuHealth for daily eye health, MacuHealth Plus for aging eye support, Vitreous Health for vitreous care, Vision Edge Pro for visual performance in athletes, TG Omega-3 for ocular and systemic wellness, and MacuHealth DM for eye and metabolic support. Call MacuHealth today and mention this podcast for special discounts. Experience the difference with MacuHealth. Nutrition you can see.
With more screen usage and indoor time, myopia, also known as nearsightedness, is increasing and getting worse in children. Now, certified eye doctors can prescribe MiSight one day, the first and only FDA-approved soft contact lens to slow myopia progression in age-appropriate children. Visit CooperVision.com to find a Brilliant Futures certified eye doctor near you. Do your patients know what presbyopia is?
There are people who are afraid of the press.
Have you talked to your patients about multifocal contact lenses?
I've heard the bifocal, but not multifocal.
Do you need help with your multifocal strategy? Learn more at the conclusion of this episode.